But yeah, it's exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, we're super excited about this game in particular. Like this game is one of our most exciting designs to date, I think.
Yeah,
So.
it's one that I've been waiting for personally for a long time to do. So it's definitely keeping us awake at night.
Well, I'm just glad that you guys, are back out, with a brand new game because you guys have had great success with Brook City, with Street. I can't remember the names. I just had them pulled up.
History Masters, yeah.
Street Masters, Alter Quest, and now you have the Hour of Need, which I have to say, guys, you really went back on this one when it comes to the artwork. Like, you're bringing back like 1950s style artwork into your game. Where did you come up with the idea that this was going to be your next game?
Well, we've always had like we always talk about our interests and like our IPs and themes we like, and I think over the years, we've had strong interest in fantasy. We get into sci-fi and stuff like that. We have a lot of interests, but one thing that's been constant is just superheroes, like comic books. We've always had an interest. We used to both be artists, so we would just draw comics when we were younger, make up silly heroes and everything. So we grew up with a very strong interest in this, and the older we get, the more relevant it becomes because we have like the Marvel, you're sure the Marvel MCU is exploding. They're doing amazing things, so it's a really good time to be a comic book nerd, and we've been waiting to do a comic book game for a long time. It's just we were kind of waiting for the right time, and we just felt like now is a great time to do one. So now we're finally going to do something we've built up for a while, and we're just really excited to show everybody.
So I'm going to ask, how sad were you guys when you saw, like, 2 weeks ago, the Champions game got released by Fantasy Flight? Because it looks like they had the same idea.
Yeah, it was a mix between excited and oh man,
well, for me it was almost pure joy because I remember watching the Gen Con announcement and like we were talking about our marketing strategy for Hour of Need, and we didn't know, even though Adam and I work a lot with FFG, they don't tell us everything. We didn't know they had this in development. People just kept telling me we have a game you're gonna love, and they never told me what it was, but they were right. When they announced it, I just freaked out. I was super excited. So I've been mostly just stoked for it. And I get that, it's a big superhero release, so people are always under the assumption like, does this concern you? I get that. It's just, fortunately, I feel like it's great because they both coexist. They do different things. Like for example, Hour of Need is not trying to do what Marvel does. Marvel Champions is like for me, it's like the best co-op card game I've played. I love it. I'm just so excited for it. But Hour of Need is much more of a spatial, tactical kind of adventure game. They both use cards, but luckily there's not too many similarities beyond the theme and the card play and everything. So I'm pretty excited overall. I can understand some people might be like, well, too many superheroes, but that's not me. So.
Right.
Yeah, if you're a superhero fan or a comic book fan, there's definitely room for both on your shelf. I enjoy both of them as well. So I was super excited about Marvel. I still enjoy playing it, but I feel like it feels totally different than Hour of Need. So.
Now, one of the things I did notice was a little similarity, but the way you guys did it, I kind of liked it better, and that was the scheme effect. You guys both have schemes in your games, and the way Marvel does it is you have your scheme that's set up that randomly may come out, every once in a while. Yours seems more risk of threat when it comes to your schemes and how they build and how they affect the overall goal of what you're trying to stop. So
right.
Where did you come up with the way you portrayed your scheme?
So the one thing we wanted to do for sure was we wanted to make sure that the scheme was tied to the issue that you're playing, and any villain can do any issue. So no matter,
and the issues are like kind of the stages or the scenarios you're playing, where you have the enemy deck, the hero deck, and then the issue deck. And the issue deck has the issue board, and that determines the scheme, the villain's try. It's pretty much your loss condition, and also just creates the play space where you're playing, the environment you're playing on. So,
yeah, so we wanted to make sure that it was disconnected there, where you could play any villain with any issue, and that way, whenever you're playing, for example, Dowager from the core game, the demo kit. She's not always trying to do the same thing. It depends on what issue you're playing in. For example, in the Century Heist, which is the demo kit issue deck, she's trying to rob a bank. But she might be doing something else, where she might be trying to smuggle in some dangerous cargo.
Yeah, or some crazy voodoo drugs. Yeah, one of the other issues. Yeah, so every issue has these And the one thing we want to do is really tie into narrative to these issues you're playing through. So they're not just they're not like repeats where if you play an issue you'll know how to address it, because every issue is essentially a different crisis management operation. You're trying to like balance out all these crises going on. The villain scheming, bad guys are kidnapping bystanders. There's the issue deck. If you run out of time doing what you're doing, then you lose. And then every issue has fixed schemes that you have to solve that are that are all tied to the whatever the villain is scheming on the scheme effects on the board. So there's a lot of like narrative, and there's a climactic, like cinematic feel to the encounter. And as much as I love Marvel Champions, I feel like Marvel Champions does a great job of abstraction, and we're doing a lot less abstraction. It's a lot more visual. It's a lot more visceral. You're like on the streets busting crime. You're seeing it all play out. So it's not just all happening in card form. You're watching all these figures and characters move around and stuff. So
and there's ups and downs when you're fighting. When you're going up against a villain, you can't just go up and attack him right away. You have to resolve these schemes or these scheme cards first, and then you can reveal the villain before the showdown. So there's a little narrative arc, and it has some ups and downs. And
it's like a 3-act structure where the first act is the villain's laying out his plans and you're trying to figure out what they are, and then the second act is when you unravel his plans and you go after him, and then the final third act is when you have a showdown, a battle, and you're fighting in the issue. And lots of issues can change that up, but that's kind of like the default narrative structure for each of these, each of your sessions. And you can just modify those by socketing whatever decks you want. You can mix and match, or you can add in like any modular rules that we're going to be adding through stretch goals. So.
Right. And another thing that was a part of your game now is how the what's the God damn it sorry how the hostages can actually be taken, which is not in Marvel.
Right.
Where you have the second and third in command doing stuff on one side of the map, and then you have the main villain on the other side, and you're like, wait, where do I go next? Like I can't. Forget about this person because they're constantly shooting me. But at the same time, they're stealing all the gold over here. So how did you come up with that schematic there where it's like, okay, we're going to cause it where the board, there's so much going on? Because in a lot of cases, it's very linear in paths when you're playing games like this. Or if you have an event such as Legendary, again, it's a path that you're going through, and things can happen. Maybe it's when certain events happen. But with yours, it's like every single round, here it comes. Waves and waves and waves. Yeah.
And that's one thing we wanted to play up is just like to give players a sense of power, like a heroic power, because they're these, they're heroes, they're superheroes. So we wanted to make sure there was a, very superhero style threat that you had to face to use your powers. So it's kind of, for lack of a better term, it's swingy in a lot of ways, and not in a bad balance way. But the power levels can swing during the game, so you might be doing really well, but all of a sudden the villain kidnaps the bystander that's like the last one on the map, and that was your last clue you needed to get to be able to have some dice to throw against the villain on a showdown. So there's all these like situations that arise kind of just organically through these card effects in the game, and you're not sitting there reading through piles of flavor text to get that theme through. It's just playing out visually in front of you because it's built into the mechanics. And that was one of the key choices. I'm glad you pointed out the bystanders, because they were a very crucial element to the early design process, because like what heroes typically have to do, you're always saving people. Like that's the default thing. You got to save some people. That's heroic, So that's your default way to get clues, which will give you the additional edge you need to take out the villain. Because without clues in the game, which are these small cards that you can either use for extra dice or for bonus effects, without those clues in the game, it's kind of outweighed battle with the villain having more power than you. Have to have those clues to be able to balance the scales a little bit. So
it's definitely the bystanders are kind of the stars of the show. It is their hour of need that they need you to rescue them, and they're always going to be in every issue. We also have some, we've teased a little bit of the stretch goals coming up, and one of them is a special bystander. We have these modular rules where you can have special characters come in as bystanders, where they might have different effects of them getting captured or you rescuing them, giving you a bonus. So it's another modular element. You can change your game up and make it different every time.
Now, one thing I do want to talk about, and that is what you guys just said about the fact that, you have to save the bystanders, do something heroic. But have you ever thought about the element of the new show that just came out, in the comic, The Boys, where it's like heroes aren't as heroic as we think? Was that ever something that you were like, that might be an interesting perspective?
There's room for that kind of stuff in the game, in the system. So it's something that we could explore. One thing that was important to us, and we want to appeal to a wide array of gamers and fans of comics, but typically we're kind of coming this from our own kind of love letter to comics. So this is kind of more of our childhood kind of vision of what we wanted our iconic comic book IP to be. So it's more geared toward that with pure heroics and everything. We want to have some of the darker stuff in there and play with those themes, but it's probably going to be more so touched upon, kind of hinting at those things. But for example, with Street Masters, we had all of the bosses in the game. You could buy a pack to make them into kind of anti-heroes, essentially. They could play as them as fighters, but they have their own little dark stories that you have to play through to kind of see what their road to redemption was. So something like that would be totally within the lines of what we would do for a product like this. So it's just a matter of how much interest we can put into the product line.
Right. And actually, we have a comment on Facebook that I'm gonna read out, because Adam Keller, he says Brook City gameplay is a lot like the Trolley Dilemma, and Hour of Need looks like it has the same. And that's a really interesting kind of topic that is brought up in hero-based games, is the Trolley Dilemma. Do I do this and save one person, or do I do this and save many? In which way is that benefit going to help? So how does that affect your gameplay in trolley problem type areas? How bad does a bystander dying affect your heroes?
Right,
so, that happens a lot.
Yeah. So there are several elements in the game that cause you to lose. Being defeated as a hero, you don't lose the game. You get set back, but as heroes don't give up. You can keep playing. But anything that bad happens, like for example, a hero getting defeated, having to place a bystander and there's none left in the pool, having to place a minion and there's too many out. All those things cause crisis in the game, and crisis are these little effects that basically escalate the villain winning. So all these things that you have to manage are not just to defeat the villain, but also you want to make sure that they're not progressing on their scheme path. And for example, Dowager has something in her deck called the Widowmaker, and it's a bomb, and it will just blow up bystanders. And so, you can ignore it and it'll go away, but so will a bystander. So do you want to let a bystander die?
It's funny showing the new players, because they don't fully comprehend kind of the negative currency in the game, where you only have a limited supply of 8 bystanders, and they're going to be constantly spawning on the map. And if they can't spawn because there's too many bystanders on the map, they'll be captured. But if too many get captured, you can't place anymore. So you have this constant depleting supply of bystanders. And I'll watch new players play, and a peril comes out, and it's a bomb, and you place a bystander on it to remind you that next time it activates, it's going to blow up. And it's I watch them and see if they respond you're going to lose that bystander if you don't hurry up, and they don't really catch it right away. It's I'll worry about that later, and then boom, they lose a bystander. It's you had a chance to save that one, but
you quickly learn that not letting bystanders die is pretty important. Yeah.
Well, of course. So we're going to stop talking about the game real quick, because I want to know some of your back history when it comes to comics. Because as you can tell, anybody can tell that this is heavily driven in the comic book era. Not just those that are, 2000 plus, but this is definitely 80s, 90s, early childhood type of comics. So where does it spawn from for you guys?
Well, man, mostly from art. We would just constantly be drawing comics as kids, and we bought X-Men comics, and
I think for me X-Men was the biggest one. Yeah. There was in the 90s there was that X-Men animated series, the cartoon, which is actually the ringtone on my phone, is that theme song. I love that song. But that was kind of the big thing that got me into X-Men, and X-Men kind of opened the door to comics for me. I got into the Punisher after that and stuff like that, but I think that was pretty much what got me into it, and that was the early 90s era of X-Men. I still remember that fold-out cover of, I think, Jim Lee art of the X-Men #1. That was my first comic I actually bought.
And we both really loved the old Batman, animated series, and one of my favorite superheroes of all time is Robin, the Tim Drake Robin, if anybody's wondering. But I was always a DC fan because I loved the whole Batman Robin dynamic, and I loved Green Lantern. I had a lot of favorite DC heroes, and it's funny because I was never much into Marvel, and it's only been recently, actually this year, with a combination of all the MCU stuff going on, and then also just Marvel Champions coming out. It was a fantastic game. game. And I, just kind of I've been reading a ton of Iron Fist comics lately, and it's become my favorite Marvel hero. So I'm just constantly. It's been a constant thing throughout our lives. Just like, we have other interests come and go and everything, but I think comics have been one of the most persistent interests we've had. So it's always been in the background, on the back of our minds,
Right. So going from X-Men, one of the things you had said is, you like the stories, you love the anime that they did for it. Did you get into the story of X-Men? Chris Claremont, he had set kind of like the precedence of stories and backstory when it came to comics, because a lot of the DC before this, and even during the Claremont era, they would recycle so much. But with Chris Claremont, when something happened, it happened, and then you grew with these stories. Do you plan on doing that with Hour of Need, kind of making it more story driven rather than just going through certain scenarios?
That's a good question. We have this thing that Brady's wanted to put into the game called issue guides, which is going to be a part of the game. And it's not like a narrative locked-in scenario for what you're playing, but if you play a specific issue, I'll let Brady explain to you what this means, but it's a cool way to link narrative into the game without being locked into like a campaign or anything like that.
Yeah. So the issue guides, it's a comprehensive thing where it compiles any additional rules an issue might have for like reference or clarification, but it also provides all this narrative, and you can have the narrative set here while you're playing, set aside, and every time a certain cue happens, like a story cue, where either you solve a scheme or the villain's revealed or something, whatever the cue is, there'll be an effect on this issue guide you can read, so you can follow along this narrative of what happens. And if you're playing through all of these and all the product lines, you'll see characters pop up that might occur other places. So you have like reoccurring villains, you get backstories through issues, you learn who certain people are. And one of the cool things, like for example, you'll notice on our Kickstarter page, if you go there, one of our first initial stretch goal unlocks is a character named Loxley. And he's a nemesis unlock, and he appears in the game as kind of just a mercenary. So he's in the first issue, and I won't spoil it, but it's not much of a spoiler. But if you play a certain scheme, he may pop out, and you may encounter him, and that's kind of like his introduction. And you might want to add him to future games. So if we unlock this stretch goal, hopefully we will, you can add this nemesis to any of your games, and Loxley appears. We remember him from the Century Heist, so a lot of callbacks to where characters came from throughout your plays. So we wanted to make sure the world continuously grows as you play each of the products in the line.
And that the whole nemesis, and special bystander mechanic lets people kind of create their own stories with the game's framework. So like you said, if you want to continue this narrative of we bust up the Century Heist and we defeated Loxley, but now he's coming back for revenge. That's a cool way to just bring back, kind of create your own story with those characters.
Now, is there also a possibility, talking about not just creating the stories, but carryover effects onto the next game? Majestic got hit by this, and now she's all of a sudden, loses maybe these types of cards in her hand.
Yeah, one of the big things for this, because this is something that we talked about early on. One of the things we want to introduce this product line as is more, in a lot of ways, I look at it as just kind of the whole lifeline of comics, where they started off very episodic in nature, which is jumping into the action. Here's some characters, and it wasn't until later you started to get more of these sagas that were built and these ongoing stories. So one of the things I really want to do with this product line in particular is build a cool foundation where we have all these elements you need to kind of build your own modular things with this game. And learn these characters and stuff, because that way in the future, if the game does well, we can expand it and do more full-fledged, and ideally, if we can pull it off, actual comic books that guide you through these games you're playing, and you'd have these persistent effects where you might have a sidekick or something, and they're with you throughout this story you're doing, and they might die, and you have to deal with that. You have some kind of guilt for that, and it's going to affect you from game to game. So that's something we look at in the future of the game line. But right now, we want to make sure we build just a fantastically fun, episodic, really cool and compelling comic book game, because I think that's really important to get that right, and then add those cool more saga things as kind of special additions to the game as we move forward with the product line.
Right. All right. So we actually have a few comments here. We have one from David Lockwood, who said he really likes the approach to narrative, playing the game and letting the story be untold throughout gameplay. extremely that's for me a really good thing. So thank you guys for doing that. We have.
Oh no, yeah, we appreciate that too because we never want to stop and read a bunch of text to actually progress a game, you know.
Right. Scotty Mick says that the arcade game consumed his life. Same here.
That was a good.
And David also asked, don't forget about Micro Guy, as well as you guys need to hum the X-Men theme song from the show.
I can just call Adam's phone. That's his ringtone right now. So.
All right, so I have a few of your pictures up, and I want to pull up. First off, let's talk about, just like any other hero game, it's kind of hard to not create a game without minis. As you guys can see now on the screen, we have our heroes right there. So what all does this game have when it comes to minis? Is it just the heroes and villains, or is it some unique characters as well?
So we have in the base game, we have the heroes, the villains, and the villains' lackeys are miniatures. The lackeys are kind of like their henchmen that they're going around the map while the villain's scheming and trying to hold the heroes off or capture bystanders, things like that. Those are the figures. Minions and bystanders are both tokens. But we do have add-on packs available right out of the gate to upgrade your bystanders or your minions to miniatures if you'd like. And those also come with little reference cards that have additional effects. So there's special minions and special bystanders.
If you want to add more difficulty to the game because they're more advanced rules, but if once you get the hang of the game, if you want it like a more of an edge to have the villain have more of an edge, you can add these kind of more advanced rules to the miniatures to kind of give you a double purpose product. So.
Yeah, we wanted to keep the price lower on this one than our other games. Have a more easily accessible game. So the core game is only $65. And that means that like all the special characters that show up in issue decks will be tokens. Just save cost. And plus, if it's one individual character you'll only ever use for that issue, it doesn't make sense to have a sculpt for that.
Right. And the cool thing about it, too, is we have a lot of stretch goals planned. And that's what we wanted to use the stretch goals for, is to introduce more both special characters to build the world, but also those also introduce modular rules. So, like, for example, like on the page, as we said before, we have two kind of teaser stretch goals. We have Gabby Woods and Loxley. Gabby Woods also appears in Century Heist in the first issue, and she is actually Majesty's partner. She's her significant other, and she's a reporter, and she's always getting into trouble because she really wants to get the story, so she's always rushing into danger to report the news. So when Gabby appears in the issue, she's a token, and she's a special bystander in that issue to save. But when we introduce that stretch goal, it's going to come with a miniature for her, like if you want to upgrade that token to a miniature, but also another card, which means you can socket her into any other issue you want. So she can appear on the library issue where she's in the library looking for a book, and she's a bystander she'd saved. So all those little things we add into the stretch goals are going to be able to play with any issue you want to create whatever story you want to tell.
Well, why is it I feel like this bystander you just talked about is more April O'Neil kind of than it is any other one? I mean, I guess you can say it is Lois Lane as well, but
yeah.
But like it kind of felt like it was like why you're saying that.
I think it's more the April O'Neil style.
All right, so let's talk about now the diaries. We have that up. You have the diaries, which are the effects of the heroes, which people can see now on the screen. And if you guys want to talk about what the hero diaries are and effects and what they do and how they're played.
Are these the hero cards?
Yes.
Fan right? Oh yeah. So all the hero cards, these are cool because every hero deck is unique, obviously, to its hero. So for example, there we have Gorilla. We have his Sonic disruption cards. These are all their like special abilities. Gorilla's a cool character because he's a kind of a modified super soldier type character, and he's got this really interesting ability where he can create these dampening like oral fields around him, so he can like have hyper stealth. He can just sneak by anybody. He's super fast, super strong. He uses combat knives because he's not afraid to make some of the bad guys bleed if he needs to. So this card right here is cool because he can exhaust enemies, which means they won't activate. So it represents him kind of sneaking by and helping his buddy sneak by creating these cool like oral effects. And then we have.
Well, it is important to know also to just talk about in general that people might not know that in this game, every hero has their own deck of cards, and that deck kind of defines that hero's play style.
Yeah.
So all the heroes will play differently. They have unique play style. For example, Micro Guy, he is a tiny little scientist guy who shrunk himself down.
He's about that big.
And he can't make himself bigger again, so he pretty much built himself a human-sized mech that he pilots around in the mech's chest. And so his whole mechanic is he goes back and forth from pilot mode to mech mode and changes up his playstyle that way. But that's just an example how every hero plays differently in the game.
Yeah, and one thing that's cool about the hero cards themselves is we added this kind of element of hand management, where besides you're just playing cards just for their effects and like playing cards in your play area just to give you more options. You also have these little icons called heroic feats, the blue icons next to the card name, and there's 4 different types. And they let you do like bonus things to represent your superpowers, like whether you're flying, whether you're really dodging bullets or something, whether or not you're just really strong, can fight a lot. So all of these are kind of like free things you can do on your turn, but you have to discard them from your hand. So you lose the card effect, but you get the ability of the heroic feat. So it's kind of just a trade-off of what cards you want to play. Like, and I always use one of Gorilla's cards as an example. He has a card called Silent Knife, and it has a strength icon on it. So you can play that card and have like a buffed up attack because he's like pulling his knife out. Or if you don't want to spend an action to play it, you can just discard it from your hand. You do a quick attack, like him throwing a knife at somebody or something. So it has like this thematic nature to the hand management in the game.
Right. And now we also have, and I'm pulling this up right now, you guys can see it on the screen, which is the villain diary cards. With Bellinger, Widowmaker, the Widow's Trail. So let's talk about those now.
Yeah, sure. So every villain deck in the game is going to be the main opposition. It's going to be on the villain turn at the start of the game. Everyone's going to be drawing 1 villain card. So you might get a peril, for example, Widowmaker, which is going to spawn a peril token on the map, and it's going to be some kind of like environmental hazard or some sort of obstacle to overcome, and it's going to have some kind of continuous threat until it's taken care of, and has a solve value on it, a danger value, and that's how you get rid of it, is doing a solve action to put justice on it. Once it has justice equal to the danger value, discard it. And then we also have lackeys. So lackeys are similar to perils, but they're just minions that spawn on the board, on the map, and will move around and try to attack you or capture bystanders. And most of the other villain cards are just going to be resolve and discard, and they have these icons on them. And you can see some icons here on, for example, the one on the far right
Ruthless
there.
Ambition.
Yeah, you see that it has a colored shape. That's what color scheme panel is going to get a minion that turn. So you place a minion there, and then the bystander icon means you spawn a bystander on the map. And if you can't, then the villain captures one. So all those icons will have different threats that kind of come into play, and that's how it kind of accelerates her overall plans, because all of those things that she's doing just contributes to her pretty much it's her engine to create more scheme effects, essentially.
All right. First of all, I'm actually still staring at these cards because I'm really enjoying the artwork and the the textile you guys did, because it really brings me back into reading old comic books. Again, where you had so and so does this, and then it has the unique pose and expression, and it's just phenomenal. You guys, I think, did a great job, and just playing the prototype, there's already significant differences that I've noticed just in feel when it comes to the Marvel game versus yours. And you guys have definitely made a very unique type of game, and I have to thank you.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, it's something that I keep telling everybody. It's one of the games I just can't stop playing, and and people keep mentioning Marvel Champions whenever they talk about our game because it's topical. It just came out. I played both games, and they fill such different niches, but they're both like just dripping with superhero theme. It's just great to have so much cool superhero content these days.
All right. Well, we have a great question from the audience, and that is from Michael. Michael asks, personally, who is your favorite hero and villain, and why? Brody Adam and Brady, or both. You can answer. And he's asking about your own game.
Oh, in Hour of Need?
Yeah.
I think so far my favorite hero, even though I don't want to cheat and say that there's a Jim and Ice expansion, which is like me and Adam were heroes in the game. And they're obviously going to be designed very much to our play styles. So I'm going to not cheat and say Jim.
Yeah, we'll rule those out.
Yeah, because even though they are my favorite, I think my other favorite's probably going to be Gorilla. I just love I love sneaky guys. I like knives. He's like pretty much the guy I'd probably try first. And like if I was playing a video game or something, I'd be like, oh, I want the guy with the knives, the sneaky guy. So he's definitely probably up there for me.
For me, I really enjoy playing Majesty. She's got I usually like to play leader characters, and she's got a lot of good leadership abilities. She can, buff her teammates, stuff like that, and she's got some healing and everything like that. So that's kind of my play style. She's got kind of a Captain America feel to her.
Now, is he asking for villains too, or just heroes?
Villains as well.
So yeah, I think for villain, mine would have to be. So far, we've only shown Dowager like in our playthroughs, but I'm finishing up the design for Curtains, who's the other villain in the core game. I think he's probably my favorite so far. I just love his theme because you'll notice in some of the artwork we'll show, we have some teaser art to show. He's a character that has he's obsessed with the drama. He's a psychotic theater guy, and he loves just putting on a show for audiences. So obviously he wants to spawn a lot of bystanders because he wants people to watch his crimes and his antics. But he hides his face all the time, so he wears these masks that are like different emotions, like if he's shocked or if he's surprised or happy, whatever. So like there's one card in the game where it's in Stride's deck where it's called 60 Steps Ahead, and it shows her drinking coffee in the villain layer, and it shows Curtains bursting in with a suitcase, but he's surprised to see her, so he's holding up a surprised face, surprised mask.
Yeah, and since it's not really fair that I can't talk about my favorite villain because they're not revealed yet, but I'm going to go with Astasia, because Astasia is a very mysterious, cosmic villain, smoky, and like you don't know a lot about her, but she's probably my favorite.
And her playstyle is very manipulative too, so it's very much it even cranks up that whole like hand management aspect a lot because she plays off of the heroic feat icons because she really makes you test your powers because she's not quite Thanos in our world, but she's up there. So she's the cosmic entity that you just don't know how to beat her. So
when it comes to creating villains, how do you decide what you want their abilities to be or their characteristics? Do you take your own personal traits or your brother's traits and be like, that's quite villainous?
I take my kids. I take my kids. There's one villain in the stretch goals I wish I could tell you about, but it's very much I designed it specifically for my son because my son's 4 years old, so he's got a very limited vocabulary, but he's got like one obsession. So I had to design this character, and I'm sure when we unlock him, when he's revealed, if anybody who's listening will probably know which villain I'm talking about. But so there's always this kind of like persona we want to go with first. Powers are kind of secondary for me. I kind of want to create a persona first and then kind of develop why are they this persona? What makes them like this? How do they get what they want done? And
how do they overcome powerful heroes?
Yeah.
How do they, use their, intelligence or their tricks to.
And I'll use Dowager as an example because Dowager was like one of the earliest ones we came up with because I like the concept of this woman who's very ambitious, and she pretty much has her mob boss husband killed and takes over the mob in his place. That's why she got the dowry for taking over when he died. So there's a character in the game called Wise Guy, and he was like the big mob boss villain, like Kingpin style guy, and she killed him. But she's a very nice woman in real life. She got possessed by this interdimensional spirit of ambition that made her even more ambitious and ruthless. So now she's like this possessed mob boss that's like killed her husband, inherited a boss, and now she's just insane, blowing everything up. So that was really fun developing that character because the first off I had a concept of like a widow and just a really powerful widow, and we just went from there, and that's where her powers came from, her abilities and everything. So that was a really fun experiment for designing a villain.
Now we have two more comments here that I really want to read out. One is from Adam. He asks, any chance of a Street Master style rendition decks for the villains going into your game?
Well, that's something again where like we'll
say it's not out of the question.
Yeah, it's obviously something we could do. It's not something we'd be excited about because I think it takes away a little bit of that specialness of the villains. Because if I went out to play a game, I wouldn't expect if I wanted to play a Batman game, I wouldn't expect to play the Joker. I'd like that. One of the appeals of the villains is like facing off against them. But that being said, it's obviously something we can do. We've done it before with Street Masters, but it all depends on just how the campaign does. What we can support, what we can pay for, and everything. So it's not out of the question.
And then we have a question from Jason Michael Owen, who asked, any plans on making comics to aid in the narrative of the game?
I really would love to. It's mostly just a cost thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say
so much art, so much unique art.
You mentioned earlier the issue guides. That's the narrative's going to be there, but I'm not sure we can afford the art to do actual comics. But that it's definitely something we'd like to do in the future. So.
Yeah, I want to balance that out because like a lot of people like comics because of the brevity of the storytelling and the visual storytelling. So I don't want to just inundate people with a bunch of text to tell a story, but we're kind of just trying to balance out, throwing in some little blurbs here that might work as exposition boxes, but we just realistically probably can't afford to do that much unique art. But it'd be something where if the IP does well, I would push for that for sure, because it's a dream of mine to write comics. So.
And you know what? That's basically what Marvel and DC did in the early 2000s. It's like, let's create all these one-off characters, give you a book, enjoy. We're going back to the other stories. All right, let's get back to the campaign. You guys are 78% to funding. You guys have revealed some stretch goals that you have planned. Is there anything that you're looking forward to that you can talk about once you guys do fund?
Mostly, I think we can talk about just kind of like the stretch goal model, because I'm pretty excited about it, because we specifically designed the core game to not just kind of stack on these kind of just superfluous stretch goals where it's like either just aesthetic upgrades or just incremental content. It's kind of both, because we want to make sure there's a good balance between introducing cool characters, having this like constant world being built through the stretch goals, but it also just helps create this like pile of modular rules you can just sock into any game you want. So pretty much all of our stretch goals are going to be just different types of content which can be used to customize your games. So anybody that worries about, this game only has 4 scenarios, well, no, because you can take each one of those scenarios or issues and change it up by adding whatever characters you want, taking out certain characters. There's all this customization you can do. So that's the thing I'm most excited about, is just like the modularity of the stretch goals, and also just the thematic nature of all these cool characters lined up to come join the game.
Yeah, and we definitely have cool heroes and villains also on top of that, unlocking those. Those are bigger stretch goals because they're whole new decks of cards.
Lots of art.
But we do have them, and we're excited to show off some new heroes and villains.
Well, that's exciting, guys. And so how long is this campaign going to run?
This one's only 20 days. We're doing something. We're trying this out because usually we have 30-day campaigns, and I feel like they're going a little too long because there's always that slow lull in the middle, and it's like there's not really much going on. So
yeah, and we're coming up to the holidays too, so we want to make sure we keep it kind of not too spilling over into those shopping days.
So it does give us a smaller window, but we'll see how it goes, and it'll definitely inform us for future Kickstarter to see how that one does. But as long as this one funds, we'll be happy. So
all right, and when are you expecting for this one to be ready and delivered?
This one it's scheduled to ship November 2020, but typically we stay ahead of the game pretty well. So that's those are always our generous.
We always estimate realistically, so we don't just try to give you an optimistic number. So we'll have this ready next year, but we always make sure we plan out months ahead just to make sure we have time for fulfillment issues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I have one final question for you guys, and I know this is going to throw you for a loop because I said no hard questions, but I lied. What I want to ask you guys is, you guys have been in the industry now for a couple of years, and you've built a variety of different thematic type games. Where would you want to see the future of gaming when it comes to themes?
When it comes to themes, personally, I'm kind of easy to please with themes because I don't need a lot of obscure themes usually. I don't mind just revisiting themes that I've done before in different ways because in my mind, people are always going to see certain themes in different ways. So, for example, I've seen other comic book games, but I haven't seen Hour of Need. So, I mean, that's kind of an example of I want to see more of certain themes. But one thing I will say, this is a kind of a personal thing, is we got to start making some sitcom games.
That was my answer.
I wanted like a Seinfeld or a Friends game so bad.
Yeah, something like a really conversational type game where there's a lot of like cool mechanics that drive some simple game where you're just like at some party that you're trying to leave early or something, and that's the game.
Because you have all these combat-driven games or adventure games, but you could have those similar mechanics and those similar ups and downs by just kind of converting that into be like, well, here's a social situation. How do you get your way out of this?
Though, I mean, we've had those games, back in early 2000s, 1990s. I think it was Milton Bradley put out a lot of those games, that were themed on, Friends. What was it else? Just so many different sitcoms that it just never seemed to work. It was those that you felt like, it was just scratching that itch some more. So how would you...
Yeah, it's usually like a party game or something. Right. It's usually like either a party game or like kind of a goof off like trivia game or something. But I think you can apply gamerly mechanics, like hobby game mechanics and like hobby level depth to a game, but make it like more geared toward. And in my mind, it's like I wouldn't want a licensed like Seinfeld game. I'd want a game that has an original IP, but it's created to be like kind of recreating the love of an old 90s
a game about nothing.
Yeah, a game about
nothing. You guys keep on bringing up Seinfeld, so I take it you guys really enjoy Seinfeld. So
it's his fault, man. Like, I'm usually like a Friends Office guy, but like he was.
I was on a Seinfeld skit a while ago. So
if I'm not watching like Always Sunny, then I'm watching like something old like Seinfeld or Friends.
Yeah, I mean Seinfeld is just so quotable, especially the soup Nazi. That one. How can you forget about that? But I think that would be an interesting. How do you get out of this situation? No soup for you.
Yeah. There's so many issues you could do. Yeah, so many.
How do you deal with that soup Nazi?
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me on my new series. Good luck to you, and have a happy holidays because we're coming out on Thanksgiving and everything.
Yeah, you too. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for having us.
All right, guys, I'll talk to you later.